Welcome to the 913th meeting of the Board of Directors of MSAD number 27. Roll call, please.
Keith DeJondro.
Here.
Shannon Luckett.
Here.
Abby Pooler.
Here.
David Susi.
Here.
Tanya was in.
Here.
Gary Sibley. And Sarah Ashley.
Here.
Item 2, adjustments to the agenda.
I should have put a new agenda in front of you. It's a white copy and it has 3 adjustments. Under committee reports, policy committee, we're going to add first read of policy ADAA and ACAAR. And then under new business items for information transfers, we have a transfer of a CHS cook to FKES head cook. And also add an item 3, continuing education early childhood aid.
Do we have a motion to add the agenda items as read? Moved by Shannon,
Second.
seconded by Sarah. Any discussion? All in favor? Very good. Motion passes. Public participation.
Don't believe it.
No public. All right, moving on. Approval of the meeting minutes of the 911th meeting on May 8, 2022. Do we have a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Moved by Tanya, seconded by Sarah.
Yep.
Any discussion about those meeting minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving minutes? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion passes. Motion to approve the meeting minutes of meeting 912 on May 19th. Moved by Abigail, seconded by Tanya. Any discussion?
There was just an edit on Abby's name on, under
There.
item 6, new business, D, has her as Abigail Walker.
Oh, yeah.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Could have been bad.
Thank you.
Just so you know, Abby Lavoie is a teacher in one of our districts.
Good catch.
Nice catch.
All in favor of approving the meeting minutes for meeting 912? All in favor? Very good. None opposed? Motion passes. Approval of financial statement for May 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I do not believe, oh yes, they are in there. I apologize.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Sarah. Do we have a second? Seconded by Abigail. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the May financial statement? Say aye. All in favor? None opposed? Very good. Motion passes to approve the financial statement for May. Okay, item 6, presentation. Please welcome our Executive Director of the Maine School Management Association, Stephen Bailey. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for making the trip.
Thank you.
Steve, the show is yours.
And where would you like me to?
Wherever
stay
you
represent?
want to be.
Maybe down here at or Gary's seat? Gary's not gonna be here, right?
No.
So yes, I'm Steve Bailey. I am the Executive Director of the Maine School Management Association, but equally so, I'm Executive Director of the Maine School Boards Association. So in your packet, there are a couple of things I just would like to point out tonight as we start to go through these. There are 2 little brochures here, and the very first one, the small one, the trifold, is about Maine School Boards Association. And on the inside, you'll see each of the 9 regions that we have. And as you may have seen, if you're getting our emails that we send out, we do have regional meetings. And I know at least Keith has been to some of them, and maybe some of the rest of you as well. But the next one we're having, and the one that's scheduled, is for September. And at the September regional meeting, we'll be going over the resolutions that will be introduced and dealt with at the October Delegate Assembly. So that's one of the purposes of our regional meetings. Other connections that we try to make at regional meetings is to try to get people from your region together. So Lucy Richard is your president of MSBA. She's right over here in Presque Isle. And Ron Sillaboy is a director from Region 1 over in Hodgson, MSAD 70. We may be looking for another director from Aroostook County come this July. So if any of you are interested in putting your name in for an application to be able to be on the MSBA Board of Directors, that would be something that we would value as well. And hopefully that email came to you maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago in terms of just seeking nominations or applications for MSAD Board of Director positions. But we do value the input from all of the regions, and the Board of Directors themselves meets 6 different times a year. The last couple years they have been able to be remote. We do meet in person from time to time, and when we do meet in person, we like to have people present if they can come. We provide remote connections if people can't come. And if you're able to be on the board and you do travel down, we do pay mileage back and forth to be able to get you there and get you back. So we do value your involvement. The other brochure is just something about MSMA and the different kinds of services that we at MSMA do provide. The Maine School Management Association really is, we consider it both an umbrella organization for MSBA as well as MSSA, the Maine School Superintendents Association, but we also consider it more as the foundation of the support for those 2 organizations, because those of us who work for MSMA do provide a variety of different services. So that's about that, and the important part of that really is just to speak about MSMA, MSBA is here for you. We're a member service organization, so if you have questions, if you have things you want to inquire about, my card's in there, my telephone number, my cell phone number's in there. Really try to be as much, even though we do sleep a little bit, 24/7, service organization where we can be, and my email's in there as well. So don't hesitate to make connections if you feel the need. But for me, it would be very helpful tonight. Just say one more thing about myself in terms of, yes, I'm Executive Director of MSBA and MSMA, but a lifelong educator with all but 2 years in Maine. Those 2 years were in New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire. I went back there for 2 years, decided Maine was a better place, and I wanted to come back here. I'm still thinking that as I see different things happening in New Hampshire, but I'm very glad to be here. I'm entering my 50th year of education supports, both as a teacher, principal, curriculum coordinator, assistant superintendent, and superintendent before I took on this role in 2017. So I've traveled the state. Keith and I were talking in terms of, from Madawaska to Elliott, New York, and Cumberland, as well as the East Coast, all the way over to Freiburg. Number of different presentations, doing this type of thing in terms of board workshops. Board development is really, really important, not only when you have new people coming onto the board, but also as you get into your board work and just think of yourself as a maturing board in terms of your interaction and relationships you develop and how you begin to work better together as a full board. So if we could, maybe start right here, and just if you could indicate your name. Obviously you're from MSAD 27, but if you represent a specific town within MSAD 27, that would be helpful for me to know too, as well as how many years you've been on the board.
Sarah Ashley, I represent Fort Kent, and it'll be 4 years this fall,
Okay.
so it feels like a lot longer.
Yes.
Shannon Lugden, I represent Wallagrass, and I've got, I think, 3 months
Okay,
on the board.
all right. So your elections happen at different times of the year also? Or do they all happen at town meetings, or do they happen?
Town meetings are different, right?
Yes.
In different communities, or are they all the same?
I
time?
think they're all the same now. Eagle Lake was the
Oh, yeah,
odd
and they're all in.
one, but
Oh,
everybody's
in March?
March, everybody's in March.
Okay.
I was appointed. Why it's fall.
Tanny was in. I'm also 3 months, and I represent Fort Kent.
Okay.
Keith Jondro, I represent St. Francis, St. John, and a portion of Fort Kent. Been on the board for 11 years.
I'm Abby Pooler. I represent New Canada and like Keith, a portion of Fort Kent. I've been on the board for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
Dave Susi, I represent part of Fort Kent, and I'm one of the 3-monthers.
Well, very good. And it's nice to have actually a mix of people coming onto the board as well as people who've had some experience. You'll be able to learn a lot from each other, both in terms of new perspectives, possibly, and then also just in terms of the experience that the people who have been in here for a longer period of time bring to the board. So it's nice to be able to have that mix. Tonight, we will use the packet to be able to help organize our work. On the left-hand side, you will see a series of slides that are organized in terms of a note-taking form. So you can take notes on them if you want. You can also use them to refer back to at a later point in time. We won't necessarily go through each of the slides, but we'll use them just as kind of discussion starters, for our work tonight. On the right-hand side, you'll see a series of handouts. Some of them are your policies, and some of them may be suggested policies that we have, and then there's some other readings that are in there that we won't go through all of them tonight, but again, I provide them to you for some potential work and reading beyond tonight's meeting. So, purpose tonight, we identified 4 to be able to talk with you about this material. One is to review Maine School Board statutes in terms of why and how and where you get authority and responsibility for doing the work that you're doing. Also to think about your time coming together in terms of every time you're together, in terms of that development of yourselves as a team. You are the governance team, you're the governance body of the MSAD 27 school department. So you are the decision-making body for MSAD 27. Obviously, anytime we're together, we try to think about this in terms of enhancing board member learning, and then also establishing a strong collective understanding of roles and responsibilities. Because if you can understand that together, you can help each other as you come into situations that may or may not be something that you're clear on and you want some other guidance. And so making sure you're clear in terms of roles and responsibilities is extremely helpful. So if those are our purpose, I'd like to just do a little bit of a check-in with you, and I'm just going to take some notes myself here. But if you have things that you are hoping to learn, or you had questions about, or you've been in this role now for 3 months and you've had some questions about such and such, now would be a good time. Or board members who have been here for some time, if there are questions that you know that might, if they were asked, might be helpful to other people who are here that were helpful to you as you first got into this role. So I'll just give you a little bit of a wait time minute here to figure out, are there things that you'd like to have covered in addition to what you see in terms of the slides. But anything that comes to mind?
Well, one thing I've brought up repeatedly, especially with our newer board members, is when you're dropped into this role during budget season, it's quite a shocker, and you really you can't be expected to have a full grasp of what you're being in a position to approve at that time. It's just not entirely realistic. Even for those members that have been on the board for several years, to understand the impact on your local communities, how their contributions to education, their local contributions to education is going to be affected. And also how education might be affected if we can't approve the desired amount for the proposed budget. So there's a lot to take in there. And I think there are some resources on the DOE website. I think maybe a few of you have seen that presentation, but I think that's one of the bigger challenges as a new board member. Just remembering back to 2011 when I started here, it was just, into the frying pan you go, right?
Yeah. I've often said that until you've been on the board a full year, you don't know necessarily the cycle of what happens when, as well as the impact of certain things during certain times of the year. And when I said that statement, some people have said, no, it's been 3 years, no, it's been 4. I mean, because every time you're in a situation, it may be something new. I mean, we never had COVID before. We never had all the money come into us, you know, from the federal government like it did, you know, over those, 3 or 4 different grant cycles that we've had. That all was new. That all had to be learned, and new decisions had to be discovered and discussed. Yeah, it is a learning process. That's why it is important and of value to be able to take advantage of the folks who have been here. But the other thing that I would say, don't be hesitant to ask questions. And obviously you can ask questions during the board meeting, but if you have questions in between meetings, your superintendent's a phone call away. Your board chair is a phone call away. A more experienced member that might be considered a mentor to you, might be a phone call away. And we'll talk about the use of email a little bit later. Maybe you've already covered this, Ben or Keith, in terms of some of your other conversations. But there's ways you can use email. There's ways you can't use email, and we need to make sure we're aware of that too. Other questions? And to be honest with you, it'd be great tonight if you do have some questions, because I really prefer to have this be conversational than just all presentation. I can do it all presentation. We've got an awful lot to share. And I know we've got a cutoff time to be able to make sure you get to the rest of your meeting tonight. But if we can make it informal and conversational, that'll be great as well. So don't hesitate as I get rolling. If there's a question that comes up, a comment you want to make, please don't hesitate to interrupt or insert something at that point in time, okay? All right. So, first thing after you got elected, you needed to go to your town office and be sworn in, right? So the oath that you give, the oath that you state, essentially has a couple of things in it. Not only that you talk about faithfully discharging to the best of your abilities the duties incumbent on you as a school director, but according to the Constitution and laws of the state. So those are the two things that are in the oath, the Constitution as well as the laws of the state. And so that's one of the things that organizes you and makes you different than other elected bodies, either within the town or within your county, is that you're governed by laws that are set up by the state. And we'll go to that the next slide that really speaks to you being the governing body for your unit. You get these statutory powers from the law book. From the statutes that are organized within, and as a matter of fact, I use it mostly. I go to the legislature page of Maine.gov, go to the statutes, and then go down to 20-A, and within 20-A is subsection 1001. And within that, subsection 1001 are duties of school board members. There are 22 different subsections there right now of what school board members are given the duty and responsibility to do. And that's what governs you as school board members. And some people and residents also who don't understand this necessarily think that it's the people who elected you that govern you. But you really are governed by the statutes that are in the law book. And we'll talk about this in a little bit different way in a minute in terms of who you're responsible to. But I wanted you to know and both hear and feel and know where to find it is that area of 20A that really identifies your roles and responsibilities given to you by state statute. On the right-hand side of your packets, you do have some handouts here that speak specifically to this. And you've got your school board powers and duties, which is your handout number 1. That handout number 1 really is a summary of the laws in terms of what you're supposed to be doing. You're legislating, policy making, oversight of educational program, personnel employment. You have a quasi-judicial role, which is a legal responsibility in terms of acting as a court of appeal. You're responsible for budget, finance, school facilities, and communication with the public. And to the point, you have solidified that with your policy BBA. And let me just point out, too, in terms of policies, policies are very, very important. You're going to be covering over some of those tonight. Policy section B, as you know, is the section dealing with board duties and responsibilities. So that's an important one both to know as well as to be able to be familiar with. All of them are very important, but as board members in terms of roles and responsibilities, powers and duties, that section of section B is really, really important. But this particular one, code BBA, says the board shall concern itself primarily with broad questions of policy rather than with administrative details. The application of policies is an administrative task to be performed by the superintendent and his or her staff. The superintendent and staff will be held responsible for the effective administration and supervision of the entire school system by the school board. So, as a statement there, you as a board have one employee. That employee is the superintendent. The superintendent, through you, through a nomination process, provides nominations to you for teachers and for principals. And the board has to approve those, and then a contract can be offered by the superintendent. But your one employee is the superintendent, and so in terms of your process of supervising and evaluating, that process goes to the superintendent in terms of that's what your work is for. The next paragraph here, the board functioning within the framework of laws, court decisions, attorney general's opinions, and similar mandates from the state and national levels of government, recognizing the authority of the state, fulfills its mission as a governing body of a political subdivision by acting as follows in the execution of its duties. Enacting policy is your primary role. And then you have others that are listed here, providing for the planning, expansion, improvement, financing, construction, and maintenance of the physical plan of the school system. And a lot of these are going to be more detailed of the first document that we talked about. So these two documents together, along with the statutes that are in the law book, provide where you get the power and the authority to be able to act as you do as the governing body for MSAD 27. The third handout on the right-hand side, I want to just mention because this is something that basically, when you read it, it identifies, it says that you're responsible for all students within your district. All students who are residents and who attend your school, you can't exclude any. And it's very, very important. This particular law case was happened in Yarmouth. The issue is the right of an orphan to attend school in the town where his guardian resided. The school committee denied him access to school because, among other things, they felt too many wards of the state were being placed in their town, which was an unequal burden that the town should not be obligated to bear, or so the town said. The law court, in ordering the student to be admitted to school, held that the school committee was obligated to follow the law with respect to residency, not their views about the fairness of the law to their town. So this, again, describes your responsibility to all students. If they're residents within your school unit, you have the responsibility of providing that education to them. So the last piece on this particular slide I'd like to point out is we often talk about the policies, which are really, really important for you, both to develop, adopt, and adhere to, as being the foundation of the work that the school district does. It's basically your owner's manual. And if there's a question that comes up, either by you as the board or other people within the community or school staff, the first place that I would ask you to look, what does your policy say? Or do you have a policy on it? Because school boards, this one as well as school boards before you, have made decisions about what the policy should be in terms of how your school district should be acting in given situations. And within this particular instance, not only is it your owner's manual, and so you go there first, the other place that I would ask you to go if there's a question that comes up like that is, what does the law say? So you got those two things, your policies as well as your statutes, to be able to help give you guidance in certain situations. And then there's the back pocket call that the superintendent has, and that I also have, is calling your attorney. Because if you have a real significant question, There may be an interpretation of the law or the policy based on the situation you have, and so you want some other guidance as well. And so they have been very helpful in that particular instance. Any question on this first slide? It's an important one in terms of kind of creating the basis for the rest of our work. Pretty clear?
But just one thing I'd like to add, if anybody in this room has any question as far as where to go to find those policies, ask myself or Ben, because I've referred to that. I can't count the amount of times I've had to refer back to the policy drive in the past year especially, and I'm sure Ben's done the same. So if anybody has any questions about where they're located, please feel free to ask us.
And they're right on the website, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Very, very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. Okay, so either you were appointed or you were elected. However you came to the board, you came as an individual. But as soon as you were elected, as soon as you were sworn in, you became part of a team. And that team only has ability to interact as a team when you're at an officially called meeting. So, and you only have authority as a board at an officially called meeting. That has to be posted a certain number of days. You have policy that identifies in terms of how much time is needed as well as where they need to be posted. But you're serving as a member of a team and you have no authority as an individual. You only have authority as a board. So that means when someone sees you on the street, they may know you're a school board member, but you can remind them, I have no authority or power as an individual. The board meets on Tuesday night, the second Tuesday of the month. If this is something that needs to be brought up, I'll talk to the superintendent, I'll talk to the school board chair, and we'll see if it needs to be added to the agenda. But in terms of this particular slide, you are a very important individual member of the board, but it's the board that has the authority, not individual members. And so that's something else to be very aware of too in terms of how you interact with other members of the community. And this is just a reminder slide. No authority except to enacting as part of the majority of the board, which means 7-member board, right? But do you do weighted voting?
No.
So it's basically apportionment, and so you end up with 1 person, 1 vote, and so 4 would be a majority, right? And 4 is a quorum. So you could have a meeting with 4, but if you had a meeting with 4, you might end up in a 2-2 tie, and so therefore, it's not a majority of the board. But with 4 there, and let's say you end up with a 4-3 vote, that's the majority of the board. And so the action being taken by the board would be that action identified and given by the board. The other time when you might have some authority as an individual, if when the board by votes delegates authority to him or her or them to be able to act on behalf of the board, but it has to be something that would be specifically voted at a meeting to be able to identify that that person had the authority to be able to do that. Now, some of that might be, let's say, in terms of assignment and approval of people on committees. So let's say it be let's say it's a negotiations committee. You may be acting on behalf of the board, for the committee during your duties in terms of that particular committee assignment. So I'm going to go to this next slide, which really gets into a piece of information that I started to talk about before. You're talked to by lots of different folks. You see different people in your communities, both maybe in meetings as well as out of meetings, in the stores, on the street. You're going to gain a lot of information from those people who speak with you. Plus you have your own ideas about different things as they happen within the school and the school district. You want board members who view their role as ensuring that the views, beliefs, values, and self-interests of the constituencies they know best are on the table as part of the conversation and are representative of. So as you bring that information to the table, as you bring that information to the conversations that you have, you are trying to represent, both what you've heard as well as what you're thinking. Now, that part is all good, and you put that on the table during your deliberations, during your conversations about different items. You've got a motion that's been made, you've had a second that's been made, and so now you're engaged in that deliberation, the conversation about a specific item. After you've had that conversation, this next sentence, I think, is extremely important. You voice those interests and opinions of those you know best, and then vote on behalf of the best overall interests of the organization. So, in terms of, yes, you know what other people think and say, and you have your own ideas, but then also you need to filter that to say, okay, well, what's in the best interest of the organization? And in this instance, the interest of the organization is what's in the best interest of students. So as you think about how you act, how you vote, where you have that conversation, and where you think about how you're going to cast your vote, even in consideration of all the information you take in, the best overall interest of the organization, what's in the best interest of students to be able to move that work forward. So I'd like you to think about that a little bit, and also maybe even cast back to it, when you come to some difficult decisions that you might have. We're going to talk about this slide again in a little bit of time as we get into the your code of ethics conversation that you have. I want to move on though a little bit now to a next kind of a consideration in terms of what your role is compared to the role of the superintendent. Because they're two very important roles, but they're also very different. 7 school board members, you're together as the governance team. When you put the superintendent in play, you become the leadership team, the educational leadership team of the district. And it's really important that you include the superintendent and he include you in your thinking, your planning, your guidance of the district as you continue to move the district forward. So in this particular slide, I like to come down to the bottom first, because what you really are trying to gain is this, trust of each other, trust from the board to the superintendent, trust from the superintendent to the board, and if it's developed, be able to sustain and maintain it, and that has to be nurtured at times. And so that nurturing comes through excellent communication that happens both ways, both from the board to the superintendent and the superintendent to you. And if you've got it, it's great. You want to make sure you try to see how you can hang on to it and keep it, because that's one of the best things that can happen in terms of a board working together smoothly as well as a district working together smoothly. And in this particular slide, it shows the roles of the board as well as the roles of the superintendent. And I mentioned before that policy work is the #1 aspect of what boards do, and it really is at about a 30,000-foot level, because you want to be up here. You're trying to guide the work of your district. And in terms of doing that, you're thinking about visioning goals and policies, and as well as what you want the end results to be. So some of that gets developed sometimes within a strategic plan or some other type of goals you've established for the district. And often that's with the superintendent, or often it's with the superintendent help leading your conversation about it. And your kinds of questions are going to be what, why, and how much, and you'll confirm that work with a vote. But that vote actually comes after the superintendent in terms of thinking about objectives, action plans, regulations, and procedures, and his concern about how are we going to be doing something. He's concerned with the what as well, but he's also concerned with the how it's going to happen. So in his mind, the questions become how, when, where, and by whom. He'll make a recommendation to you. You'll make the motion, you'll take have a second, you'll have your intense conversation, deliberation about the item, you'll take a vote, and then it goes back to the superintendent to implement. And so there's this back and forthness, working together of the superintendent with the board to be able to have this type of action happen all the time, working with this quality communication as well as working on and developing and trying to maintain and sustain that trust. Any questions about this particular slide or responsibilities of board versus superintendent? Any other comments? No? Okay. Good. So then we'll just kind of move through this one. I want to just point out two You do have a handout in your right-hand side. Your policy BDD, it's your handout number 5, also identifies what MSAD 27 feels are important as it relates to relationships of the board to the superintendent. The third paragraph down, you can see the board holds the superintendent responsible for the administration of its policies, the execution of board decisions, the operation of the internal machinery designed to serve the school program, and for keeping the board informed about school operations and problems. And then down below, A through F talks about different ways that the board as a whole and individual members shall help make sure this happens. And slide 6 is that same thing we looked at before. Not slide 6, but handout 7 is one that I provide because it showcases a couple of different things for me. One is the school committee, in terms of communication, may have a certain expectation of what would be helpful to you to be able to run your board well. The superintendent, on the other hand, down at the bottom, identifies things that would be helpful for him to be able to have the board interact with him in a real positive way. But on both of those lists, if you see down at the bottom, it says no surprises. One of the things that I would urge you to try to make sure you do is not bring surprises to the table in the boardroom. If you have questions that you want to have explored, again, use that telephone to call the superintendent to find out, well, what about this? And the same thing, the board would expect that to be true, so that the superintendent wouldn't surprise you as a board, in a board meeting and ask you to act on something you had no prior knowledge of, and make it be such that it looked like you didn't know what you were doing. You want to both not only give the impression, but also be a well-oiled machine as it comes to making sure that you know the information you should know before you come to the meeting, so that you know what you're going to be talking about, so that you know when you take the vote, it'll be an informed vote as much as possible, with the information that you have at the time. And then the same thing would be true in terms of the superintendent wanting to make sure that he has information to you available in a time for you to make those decisions. So we just provide that as a sample. It may not be needed here. It may be something you think about, for some time in the future. This would be a nice to have or a nice to be able to develop.
I like this.
Yeah.
Me too.
And I don't think any of it's all that new,
Right.
but I like that it's in writing.
Me too. It's a good guide.
Yeah.
So, having said that, I'll send you the Word copy. So you don't have to recreate it.
All right.
Okay? And again, I agree, it's not like it's revolutionary. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's good stuff, and you can tailor it to yourself in terms of what you feel necessary. Okay. The next thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is handout number 8. And it's also a policy that you have, BCA, School Board Member Code of Ethics. And I mentioned before that policies are really your owner's manual. We view the Code of Ethics that you've adopted really as your job description. It's kind of not only your job description, but also your commitment to each other, to be able to, and also the community, and also the staff, and including the superintendent, to be able to say, okay, if I can do these things, this will help the efficient and effective functioning of the board. And so, and you've made these a little more concise. I've seen some that have 2 or 3 others on this list. And others that I've seen also have I will statements that are included within it. But this basically has active verbs that run right down through it because it has an I will at the very beginning. Attend all regularly scheduled meetings. Recognize that I should endeavor to make policy decisions only after full discussion at publicly held board meetings. render all decisions based on the available facts and my independent judgment, and refuse to surrender that judgment to individuals or special interest groups. Encourage the free expression of opinion by all board members and seek systematic communications between the board and students, staff, and all elements of the community. Work with other board members to establish effective board policies and to delegate authority for the administration of the schools to the superintendent. Communicate to other board members and the superintendent expressions of public reaction to board policies and school programs. Inform myself about current educational issues by individual study and through participation in programs providing needed information such as those sponsored by my state, national school boards associations. Support the employment of those persons best qualified to serve as school staff and insist on a regular and impartial evaluation of all staff. Avoid being placed in a position of conflict of interest and refrain from using my board position for personal or partisan gain. Take no private action that will compromise the board or administration, and respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law. And remember always that my first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending the public schools. And again, I read those only because it was a shortened list, but I think they're all important. What I have seen some boards do, if they've had a summer retreat or some other time after they've gotten together, they'll take this out and just make sure they refresh themselves on it each year. So that it becomes kind of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is how we're supposed to be reacting. And one of the things it talks about here, D is important, I think. Encourage the free expression of opinion by all board members and seek systematic communications. And then the other part of that is thinking about how you establish and create respect for each other within the boardroom, as well as use that as a model, to be able to have other folks interact with you as they come to express their opinions during public comment period as well. But that becomes a really important part. If you can model effective and efficient and respectful communications within the boardroom, that sets a real positive tone in terms of how others interact with you as well. So, ethics in practice represent the entire district in making decisions. That goes along with making sure that you're thinking about all students. Understand the role of the board in terms of what your specific actions can be and can't be, shouldn't be. Encourage an open exchange of ideas, seek regular communications, work with other board members in a conscientious and courteous manner, and avoid conflicts of interest. The conflicts of interest really being the ones that are financial, that might benefit you personally. Now, board chair, and Keith, you've been chair for how long?
Not very long, since what, November? Yeah.
Okay, so, but at the same time, learning this role has these different types of jobs that come with the board chair. Planner. Now, not particularly as a planner, the board chair is going to have a little bit of a different relationship with the superintendent, because they're going to have to spend more time together in thinking about what's the agenda going to look like, what's it going to include, what information is needed to be able to make it available to you as board members. So in that way, is an organizer as well. I'm going to be the spokesperson for the board unless that gets delegated to the superintendent. Delegator of assignments within the school committee, school board. The school board chair also often is a liaison or confidant with other board members in terms of having information maybe shared with the chair, or also potentially from community members. Also can be the guide for new board members. Sometimes the board chair has the ability, has the opportunity, has had more experience in terms of years of on the board, so can add information that would be helpful to new board members coming on. The other thing I think is equally important, caretaker relationships. If something kind of gets out of whack in terms of relationships on the board, sometimes the board chair really can act as a person, not to mediate, but really just to try to help arrange things and conduct things so that meetings go smoothly and they continue to be respectful, and people are taking care of each other, within the board meeting. So important roles that a board chair can do. We've got duties here as well. That's on one of your slides. This next one, I just want to highlight somewhat too, because we talked before in terms of the roles of superintendent and the board. We talked about the school board being at kind of the 30,000-foot level, and the superintendent and administrative staff and other members of the school staff being where the administration of everything that happens. And so as school board members, if you can recognize that your responsibility is not to operate the school, but to see that they're well operated, there's a difference there. And you've hired the superintendent to be the chief administrator of the building, of the district. You do want to be in that role yourself. You're at a level of both implementing policies as well as helping to identify that the school is achieving the goals that you want to see happen, and you do that through supervision and evaluation of the superintendent. So that's where that interchange comes. So again, if you can remember not to operate the schools, but to see that they're well operated, a good phrase to remember. Sometimes boards get in the weeds and kind of make mistakes. If you don't understand what the chair's role is, that can be a difficulty. If you allow surprises, I've talked about that before, if you can try not to do that, not supporting the decisions of the board. Sometimes this is difficult, but the time to disagree is during the conversation you have at the time of the board meeting when you're having the conversation, you're having the deliberation about the item. That's where it's important for you to make sure that people understand your reasoning for a decision you might be advocating for. But after that conversation's happened, after the votes happened, that's the vote of the board. And so it's really important, and I didn't see it on your code of ethics. I have seen it on other code of ethics. Let me just go back and look at it again. No, I don't see it. Other code of ethics often include support the decision of the board graciously. Now, that's not specifically stated in your code of ethics, but I think it's also understood, though, as a board, as a school board, that if you were to have a vote of the board and it be contentious, but the vote of the board, let's say it was a 4-3 vote, you got 3 people who didn't have their opinion supported in terms of that particular vote, but that was the vote of the board. So it's important for the board to leave the room and say, okay, well, that was the vote of the board. I didn't get my way in that particular vote, but I need to support what the direction of the board was that particular night on that particular decision based on the information that was had. Now, there may be something else that comes up that you'll receive support from other people a different way. However, if you can think about a way to be able to support the decision of the board so that it doesn't appear as if you're sabotaging the work of the board outside the meeting after the vote's been taken. That's very, very important in terms of you working together as a team. And I just want to put that out there, because there are going to be times when that's going to be very difficult. Yes?
We're going to take that issue up
Dave,
tonight,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
We actually have been working on a code of ethics.
Okay.
We have at least a couple proposals on the table. Some of the language in the initial proposal includes the exact language that you cited, so it'll be something we're going to discuss.
Okay, well, very interesting. Didn't know that tonight, but
Well, I don't know if we'll have time for that tonight, but it's out there.
We'll see.
It's on the agenda.
thanks for bringing that up. Okay. And then this last one, the last two, just speak to protocol as well as respect for each other. It's really important for you to be able to express that and send that as a model to others. Now, effective boards understand the distinctions between board and staff roles, as well as refrain from performing management functions. You do those two things because you're the person, you're the people, you're the board that can hold the system accountable for results. And you should be asking that question of the superintendent. How are we doing in such and such? What can you tell me? What can you show me about this particular program? What can you tell me about the facilities? What can you tell me about transportation? And the superintendent, as well as those people working for him, will be able to bring that information for you so that you can make informed decisions about what to do and where to go next. I said we talked a little bit about email. I just want to bring this up as it relates not only to email, but also to social media. And I'm going to say that we didn't find necessarily a school board use of electronic mail in your policies. I don't know if we missed it.
No, we have an employee use, but not board use.
Okay, so this one, number 11 in your packet, it does suggest a policy in terms of school board use of electronic mail. I also would add social media to it, meaning Twitter, Facebook, whatever other social media platform that might be there. The reason I speak about this, and I think it's good that we talk about it tonight, is that through the Freedom of Access Act and the Right to Know law, email can't be used as a substitute for conducting the work of a board, which is supposed to be done in open meetings. And even though you might have remote meetings, and Ben, did you adopt a policy for remote meetings? Okay, so that had its own special policy in terms of what you could do and what you couldn't do. In terms of the use of email, you can't use it to make decisions. You can use it to be able to send information out, but you can't use it to be able to respond to information that's come to you and have a deliberation within that email that would give the impression that decisions are being made outside the boardroom. The public has the right to know what you're talking about. The public has the right to know and be present in terms of being in the room or being available for those conversations that you have. And so that Freedom of Access Act, which as board members, if you haven't yet, you're supposed to have had that training 120 days from the time you've been sworn in. That does give you a question and answer guide to the particular things that are included within that Freedom of Access Act. The other thing about email is that it's used if someone has a Freedom of Access Act request, your email is going to be subject to that request. So if you have something that in your email, personal or a school email account, phone account, that also can be accessed. Obviously, you can redact certain things of privacy that don't necessarily pertain to the request, but it is possible to be considered a public record and then be made available for that particular examination or request for information. The third thing that this policy speaks about is that making sure that you don't, in your communications within email, include any type of confidential information. I highly recommend that you not include staff members or students' names and/or initials, in the subject or within the body of the text. If you have that kind of a concern, that type of a question that comes up, that's the best time to get on the telephone and call the superintendent with a question that you might have, or the board chair, or to go see the person in person, so that you're not putting that level of information, within a written communication that would be then subject to a FOA request. So those are three really important things. And like I say, we do include within your packet handout number 11, which is the school board use of electronic mail. And as I mentioned, there are two other handouts in here that speak to school boards in a digital age. One's from the National School Boards Association. The other one is from the New York State School Boards Association. Some good reading as it relates to do's and don'ts, things to consider, things to remember in terms of your use as a school board member. Now, the other part of this is you're a school board member, and I say you're a school board member 24/7. People who have elected you, or they know, they see you on the school board list, they know you're a school board member. Their interaction with you may have been altered, or may be altered, because you are a school board member. Whether it be a friend or a community member or neighbor or what have you, they may want information to be shared with you so that it can be shared with the rest of the board. They may have a concern, they may have a complaint that they want to be able to make known to you that they hope then would be shared with the board. You know, in terms of what I said before, you have no authority to act as an individual to be able to say anything specific is going to happen. Don't make any promises to them. But just be aware in terms of the hats that you wear. If you're a parent and you're into the schools and you need to be interacting with people within the school building, identify that you're here as a parent. You're not here in your board role. Just make it clear to them so that they can feel a little bit more at ease in terms of not feeling like they're being scrutinized based on what their performance is because they're interacting with somebody. And even though you're not their boss, the superintendent is in terms of evaluation and supervision, they know that you're in charge of operating the entire school district. And so they do take a little bit of a different view in terms of how they might interact with you. So just be aware of that in terms of recognizing to them what hat you've got on. And Ben, I saw you hold up the placemat
Yes.
before. Was there something that you wanted to maybe highlight or point out?
No, I just said to the chairman that this is very helpful. That's going to be extremely helpful.
And again, that's something you can tailor. I can send that in Word form if you'd like as well, because that's a sample.
I
But
like it the way it is.
okay.
Well, maybe we could print it up as a placemat, though,
Yes.
That's
in a
right.
very durable form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it's used. I mean, often people do. They use it as a placemat. They bring it to board meetings, and they have on one side it's the code of ethics. The other side they've got Robert's Rules of Order or your parliamentary procedure, for certain things. So.
I like it. And yes, I'll take the Word copy.
So the social media guidelines, you've got two different handouts. We talked about that. This is just a comment that we like to share, and I kind of shared it before with you, but we talked about trust between yourselves and the superintendent. You also want to be thinking about your trust and development of that with the community, with the staff. So how you conduct yourself and your business in the public eye goes a long way in determining your credibility and support in the community. So the more well-oiled, well-seasoned, well-informed, respectful meetings that are held, then the public also says, well, they really know what they're doing, they've got their act together, and we can really understand and trust them in terms of the work that they're doing as a board. So it's very, very helpful. You have in your packet, I'm going to go to, I think it's near the end. It's going to be policy KE. It's there. 17. Policy KE is it's yours, and it deals with public complaints. Often we have a sample policy too that has public complaints and concerns. Yours specifically talks about complaints, but in both ways, it really speaks to trying to have an issue be resolved at the lowest level. Some people, because you are a board member, may seek you out and say, I want this, I'd like to have you take care of this, or I'd like to have you speak to the superintendent or bring this up to the board. As individual board members, you don't have any authority, but what you can do is help people identify that there is a chain of command, there is a process for helping resolve conflicts and or complaints or concerns. So as in your policy, ask that the proper channeling of complaints involving instruction, discipline, or learning materials in the following order. Teacher, principal, superintendent, and board. And really it says the same thing here in terms of trying to seek that resolution at the lowest possible level. Try to have the conversation happen at the point of where the concern is. And yes, I mean, your genuine good listening skills have to be observed there. And as a board member, if you can help listen real carefully, but also help redirect the person to the next level that needs to be taken care of, or next level that actually would be helpful in being able to resolve that, so that they can continue to feel as if they're making progress in trying to reach a resolution. So in this instance, as well as in your own policy, it would eventually reach the board level. But it shouldn't go to the board level first. And if you could help redirect it to staff, to principals, to then potentially the superintendent, that's the place where it would be best resolved. I see very few that actually come to the board level. They really do try to get worked at a staff level, principal level, superintendent level. Very few that come to the board level. But it is possible. I mean, if it can't be resolved at the superintendent level, they can request it to be placed on the school board agenda. And then the very important thing down at the bottom of your policy, any complaint about school personnel will be investigated by the administration before consideration and action by the board. So that's not something that the board wants to jump into. As a matter of fact, a slide that we didn't show here tonight, but we talked about at the very beginning, you do have some quasi-judicial responsibilities. One would be during a student extended suspension or expulsion. One might be a teacher dismissal or discharge, or some other information that might be relative to a law case. In those particular situations, those discussions happen within executive session. The 3-monthers, have you had to have executive sessions yet?
I don't know that we have.
One plan for tonight,
Very
yeah?
few.
With,
End of the meeting?
So it doesn't sound like
The
it.
only thing
Maybe
that
one.
was
Maybe one?
the budget thing. But that wasn't executive, just
So executive
Oh.
sessions.
Negotiation.
We went to go talk about negotiations.
Okay.
Yes.
So executive sessions, you have to go into a special way. You have to have a 3/5 vote of the board to be able to go into executive session. Once you're into executive session, anything that, you only can go in for the stated specific purpose for which you're going into executive session. That's the only thing you can talk about. And anything that happens and is being talked about in executive session stays there. It's not to go home, it's not to go to the grocery store, it's not to go to your spouse, it's not to go to your partner. It stays there. It's not even to go to each other outside of executive session after you left the session. That's intended to be there. And no official vote can happen within executive session either. When you come out, if there's action to be taken, that action has to be taken within a public session. And so this last piece right here that I wanted to just talk about in terms of the public comment, public complaint, will be investigated by the administration before consideration and action by the board. That action by the board would have to happen within executive session. That's where I wanted to make that link right here. Yes?
Who decides when that issue is resolved? Like if we bring it to the teacher and the teacher says, okay, we're done. Is that it? Or is it up to the community person, the parent, the student to say, no, that's not enough for me, and they bring it forward the rest of the way?
At the end of each determination or each conversation, if the person with the complaint or the concern still doesn't feel like it's resolved, they have the option to appeal to the next level.
Okay, so it's whoever brings the complaint?
Yes, I mean, it really has to be. I mean, and you really have to feel as if at the end, okay, well, do we have a solution here or not? And if we don't, then the person, can make, the appeal to the next level. All right. So that's where these really come in. And your question really does state, who decides whether or not, it's been resolved. Yeah. Now, do all concerns and complaints get resolved, to the happiest level of everybody? No. I mean, there are going to be some situations where there's going to have to be agree to disagree at some particular point. And you're going to have to try to work to try to reach the best resolution for situations, but there isn't going to be necessarily a best win-win for everybody within every situation. But the important thing is that you're talking, you're having conversation, you're listening, you're trying to be able to make that resolution be something that is going to be beneficial for the student. And often, as we talked about before, your decisions that are being made as a board, would be in the best interest of students. So we've talked a little bit about public participation at board meetings. We talked a little bit about how that would go before. You do have handout number 18. And that also is your policy. And this was revised and adopted May 6th of 2020. So it does have the new piece in here in terms of public comment periods being required at full meetings of the board. That doesn't have to happen at subcommittee meetings. Do you have many subcommittees?
Active ones, negotiations, policy are the most active. Facilities.
Okay, so policy and facilities, negotiations, you wouldn't have public comment anyway, but for policy and facilities, members of the public might come to the meeting, and they may be interested in what the conversation is there, but they don't have to be allowed to speak unless they're invited to speak. And then beyond your public participation policy, I have included some samples of opening comments that might be needed. Hopefully we're moving beyond the time period where we needed these in great effect at the time that we had many people coming, and meetings might have been contentious.
Not here.
Not here. But there are some samples here, and I guess what I'd like to say about this is, and the placemat reminded me of it as well. You always want to have in your back pocket good knowledge, good working knowledge of parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules. And the more informal the agenda, the less formal you need to be with Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure. The more formal, the more contentious, the more concerned you might be in terms of the flow or the efficiency of the meeting, the tighter grasp you might want to have with regard to Robert's rules. The other thing that ought to be said, though, is that in terms of public comment, one of the things I've seen work effectively is having the same statement be read every time, so that it's not only at a meeting when you've got a lot of people here that you put that a particular procedure in play, so that as people are watching, as people are looking at video, they're saying, okay, well, this is the expectation I can have. If I'm going to go to a meeting, I know that the public comment period is going to be approximately 30 minutes long, and I'm going to have about 3 minutes to speak, be able to share my views. So that someone coming to a meeting for the first time, is going to feel as if, well, wait a minute, I'm here and I've got a lot to say, and they're putting these procedures in place just because I'm here. If you can make it be something that's routine, something that they can say, oh, this is the expectation of how I can participate in the meeting, it may be good for them to know before they actually show up. The last thing I'd like to say in terms of your work as a board is that we find it helpful, again, perhaps during a retreat session, if the board were to conduct some level of a self-evaluation. In terms of the evaluation of the superintendent, I assume that the superintendent does some sort of self-evaluation. We often expect it of teachers in terms of their work. You have been elected as a board. You have goals as a board for the district. If you were to set goals for you as a board in terms of we'd like to work on developing these specific things, whether it be board development or new member orientation or monitoring of student achievement or fiscal oversight and resource allocation, I wouldn't say do this whole list, but if there are goals that you'd like to set for yourselves to say, we'd like to be better at this 12 months from now. And how would you take a look at whether or not you've made progress? One of the things you can do, and we do have some instruments that you could use, or you could make your own, but to be able to identify, okay, well, how have we done? Just like you'd want to have students set goals, in terms of their own academic learning. This is where we are, this is where we'd like to be, what are the steps we need to do to be able to get there, and then at the end of that time period, how do we do? So you're kind of looking at yourself in terms of, are we working toward becoming a better functioning board? Not that you're not a good functioning board, but even in terms of, we always think about good to great in terms of thinking about that type of a growth mindset for anything that we do. that would be one thing that I would just encourage you to consider, as you think about your board work together. It also works on helping to think about teamwork and think about your roles in terms of working together. So with that, I'm thankful for some of the questions that came up, comments that came up during the time period. Are there other questions that you had that you didn't want to share at the time, or did I generate some thoughts that you'd like to have talked about now?
I know you touched, Steve, on some key things when you got to email. I was thinking about the evolution of social media over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And these folks are so easily contacted by so many community members on a totally different level than years ago. And I think that's something that when new board members come on board, they're not ready for, and it's a big learning curve. Your Facebook Messenger all of a sudden pops up a lot more than it ever has. So any supports with regards on how to, aside from deleting your Facebook account, which works wonders, any support or guidance you guys have on how they can deal with that is.
So the one thing that I would request that you not do is, yes, you can read and you can hear that information, but I would request that you not do is a blast out to everybody. You do maintain your own individuality as a person with regard to social media, and you can have your own social media account. But I would not have you state or act as a board member on your social media account. And don't be speaking for the board on your social media account, because you can't. You're not the spokesperson. You haven't been given authority by the board to be able to do that. What you can do is you can report on things that have been decided as a vote by the board. So, in addition to what comes out as the minutes, if there's been an action taken, you can report accurately in terms of, what actually happened if people were asking you in terms of what happened with regard to a particular topic. But just remember, your actions on social media have a reflection on you as a board member as well as on the district. So, be thinking about using social media in a way that would reflect positively on you as well as on the district. And I would say if there are things that come to you, you don't have to answer everything. Yes, you can listen, you can read, but you don't have to answer everything. As a matter of fact, it's best not, to get into one of those contests that you're not going to win anyway. So you just read it, listen to it, and then move on. If it's something that is upsetting, or talk to the board chair, superintendent, in terms of the kinds of information that's coming your way, because that's important to be sharing too, because they need to know some of the things you're hearing from community members. So the piece that in terms of the Freedom of Access Act and social media in terms of use of email as a board, again, that's the time too, if something comes your way, don't respond to everybody, because that is considered deliberations within a meeting that should be done in open session when you're together in person. Anything else?
One of the things that I saw, you're elected by your area, but you represent the board in your votes.
Yes.
You represent the district in your votes.
Yes.
So that's a disconnect.
It is a disconnect, and it's a disconnect for people who voted you in.
Right.
Because they think, okay, well, you're from this particular location of the district, and you should be represented. It's different. It's not like the legislature. So, yes, you're elected by those folks, but now you're MSAD 27 as a team, and you're thinking about the district. All schools, all kids, in their best interest. Thanks for bringing that up again.
Well, just to add to that, we've been in a position where we've made decisions that weren't always popular, but we felt as a board that it was in the best interest of the organization. So, not to disregard what our constituents are thinking or feeling, but sometimes we need to look out for the greater good, and in this case, it was what was best for the district.
And you have been elected and appointed to serve in this role. And I've said this at other workshops as well. If you can't advocate for kids in terms of what you think is best for them in the organization, who's going to? So you really are in a very good position, having as much information, you're closest to it as anybody can be able to know what's needed to be able to make those decisions. So, yeah. All right. For me, if you could take just a minute, there's a little bit of a feedback form. If you could, and maybe you want to do it later, Ben, so that you can get right to your board meeting, but if they would do that, and then you could collect them and then scan them down.
Yep,
Can I,
absolutely.
Yes.
to get back to the email real quick, you said sort of offhand, and I just wanted to clarify, when somebody emails, like a community member emails, and they email all of us, I tend to just click reply all.
No.
But you're saying we
No.
need to stop that practice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it looks like we are all having a meeting.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Everybody hear that clear? Okay. Looks like you're having a meeting, and you're sharing that information with all the other 6 board members, and that information should be coming to the table, for conversation here.
So is the correct response to, I will forward this to the chair of the superintendent?
Yes. And as an individual, as opposed to copying everybody else.
But if it comes to all of us,
Yeah.
we still don't hit reply all?
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's a good practice. If somebody's emailing all of you, and I'm not included, I think the appropriate responder would be Keith on behalf of the board. And if I'm included, then Keith and I can decide who's going to reply.
That is awesome. I love that. Thank you.
Well,
Where's the meeting, right?
Absolutely. Every bit of it, right there.
the other thing I'd like to throw out there is oftentimes you'll get approached by somebody that might not be part of your district or your sub-district. And, second nature might be to say, well, this is your school board member, you might want to talk to him, but the person's in front of you, it's important enough to them, it's an important enough matter to them to where they see you as the face of the board. You bring that back to your board members at the next board meeting or the superintendent to address. Just let them know, we'll look into it.
So I want to thank you for inviting me to come up. I had said to Ben, I've been up here before. I also need to let you know that my roots are here. Grandparents from Madawaska, so it's nice to come back. My wife came with me today as well. She's in Ben's office, just trying to hang out. Had to share some of the highlights of what I remember when I was back here. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember how to make your way back?
Yes.
Big school.
Okay. Item number 7, superintendent.
I just have a few updates for you. One is school safety updates, obviously with everything that's been going on with school safety in light of another awful, tragic school shooting. I think it's important that you know as board members, I did send a letter to the families following that school shooting, just to kind of assure the community these are our efforts, but I did want to get into some of the details with you as well. So we have secured safety vestibules in this school, CHS VRMS. Immediately after, again, that last school shooting, we kind of talked as a team administratively and talked about sometimes, those people who are in control of allowing people in our schools, our doors are locked all the time. But we have students that prop doors open sometimes, or they let their friends in from other doors. We have busy people sometimes that give access because, you know, the doorbells ring. And so we had some good conversations around, we need to break those practices. And you know, somebody's buzzing in, we ask questions. You know, who are you? Even if you know them, what's your purpose of gaining access to the school? That type of thing, and look fors, you know, are they behaving normally? Are they not behaving normally? Are they carrying anything? It's difficult conversations to have with school secretaries who are mostly in charge of this, but it's very important that we're having those conversations. Principals relayed messages to the students again, please do not access the building from any other doors except for door A and door B. Those are the only doors that we're going to be gaining access from, and don't let your friends in and that type of thing. So although it's not a perfect system, you know, we are having these conversations. We hope to review them more fluidly, more often, so that we don't get into just the habit of getting where we get when things are just normal. We should be only having these conversations after a school shooting. Safety vestibule is that second layer, so if somebody does gain access past the outside doors, they are in that vestibule and they need to have a second access. They need to gain second access to access the school. We are no longer going to be propping those doors open for any reason. They're always to remain shut during the school day. And most of the time, people who are coming into the building or allowed access, they never get past the second vestibule. It's parents picking students up, it's deliveries, it's that type of thing. People do not have to pass the second access. If it's a substitute teacher, then, you know, they're on our list and they get access, and obviously students and staff and whatnot. The Fort Kent safety vestibule is supposed to be completed at any time. In the next few weeks, we have been waiting on a door, a safety door, and just lack of supply. We've been waiting on a door. So that's what's holding up that process. That will be, so if you can picture Fort Kent Elementary School where Heidi's window is, the door is going to come right after there. So you'll have a second set of doors right there, making a little vestibule, and they even have a sitting room where there used to be a bathroom there. So if there's some privacy issues, folks can sit in that little safety, that little private area. So both schools will have that that second layer, and we're hopeful that through repeated training as a staff, we can really hammer home the importance of you know, keeping all of those doors closed. We will be doing an ALICE training in the near future. It looks more like the fall. So for those of you that don't know what ALICE is the new way of responding to active shooter situations. In the past, they used to train students to hide and stay put. They know now that that's a recipe for disaster. You don't hide and stay put. You respond to the situation based on what's happening. So ALICE trains based on that. If you have a way of gaining access to the outside that's safe, windows, that type of thing, you are doing that. If you have an active shooter coming into your classroom, the training trains students and teachers to throw things at that active shooter to distract them. So there's all kinds of safety measures that are put into that based on what the situation is. And that training is in collaboration with the Fort Kent Police Department. We also have the U.S. Border Patrol that's part of that as well. We're an ALICE certified school, which means our staff has to do an annual training so that they have refreshers every year. And then every now and then we bring law enforcement when they can on site, and we have a training that's realistic, so tennis balls, that type of thing, where we're practicing those type of things. In addition to that, we're working with Darren Woods, the director of Aroostook County Emergency Management, who is also partnering with the U.S. Border Patrol. We're going to have a full-scale active shooter training in the area here. It looks like UMFT is going to partner with us on that. And that's going to be more specific to what happens after the active shooting. Every time you have one of these school shootings, you hear about the nightmare scenario of the students, you know, the students were here, were there, parents were everywhere, no one was talking, no one knew where the kids were. We have to gain some kind of control over the situation that, you know, is really unfortunate, but we have to have a better flow of who's in charge of what, where do we escape to, what are our communication processes, and that type of thing. So we're in the works of that as well, and Darren has reached out to all the Aroostook County schools, so it might be happening in all the communities, but for sure we're on the list for it to happen in this community for our schools. So when I have more information, I know that we're sending, I believe, Robbie, Steve, and Jill Kelly are going to a phase 1 of this training where we're just talking about the construct. They're going on July 7, I believe, in Caribou. They're having an initial training, so that's happening as well. I did skip the fact that we've updated all of our security cameras in both schools, more high definition, more cameras, so there's more eyes in more locations. Our school administrators can even access cameras with their phones. So if we do have an active shooter training, we can communicate where the active shooter is more efficiently than ever before, based on the number of cameras we have and where they are. So again, just more safety measures that we're very thrilled to have in place, and hopefully we'll never have to use it for that purpose, but we're learning that these things can happen anywhere. So it's all unfortunate, but we just want you to know that we're taking it seriously.
Ben, is there any analysis or balancing going on in involving the kids with ALICE training, for instance, in weighing the trauma that is imposed just by the training versus the relative benefits of having them know to do certain things?
Yeah, so with the active training, it's really low key with the students. It's more full scale with the adults, without the students. When they bring in the students, it's more conversational, and it's more, they try to make more fun out of it than using the scenario. And of course, some students put 2 and 2 together. But you know, I've been involved in a training where we have a loose dog in school, and we all have to, you know, hide, or we have to escape because of a loose dog. So depending on the age of the students and that type of thing, they tailor it to that level so that it's not as traumatizing. We also try not to have a training immediately after an active school shooting, because kids will automatically, you know, associate that. That's why we talked about the fall, having these type of discussions and that type of thing. We did have counselors on site after the last school shooting. Kids did access counselors because they had a lot of questions, a lot of difficult questions that, you know, that teachers weren't comfortable answering and didn't know how to. So we did have those supports in place. It's difficult.
Good question, Dave.
Yeah, it is.
We all have burned into our, people my age, remember duck and cover, getting underneath your seat in elementary school,
Yep.
and tucking, you know,
Yeah.
in anticipation of them dropping the bomb. And that was something seared in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know how traumatized I was by it, but it sure made an impression. I think the school shooting stuff is scarier.
Kids come back immediately after one of those events, and you can tell it's very heavy on their minds. Are
Yeah.
we safe in this school? Or, you know, can this happen here? Are our doors locked? I mean, we get a lot of that.
Yeah.
Now, is there a way, I've been hearing a couple from different community members, is there a way that we can lock the school doors so that way only there's like an access key or something to let people in? Because like, let's say like a kid is pounding on the door and another child will let them in.
Mhm.
Is there a way that could be?
Because your doors have to also meet fire regulations, you know, there has to be push bars, there has to be
Yeah.
all those things where you can escape. We've had initial conversations. I'm curious to know, because we have technology now where we have fobs, and you can actually make your student tags a fob. Is it time where we give our students access, maybe not at an elementary level, but at a high school level, so that they can gain their own access because they have the right to the school, and no one is having to buzz anyone in because, you know, we're gaining access that way. But then that leads to whole other questions about, well, what if, you know, crazy Uncle Joe gets access to, you know, a fob? So not sure.
Are you
but
thinking from inside though?
Well, like, yeah,
To
like
open the door?
Yeah, to open the door to outside.
Right.
I only bring it up because of, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard the incident in Caribou
yes.
where that person was let in.
So some schools were in the practice of keeping their doors totally unlocked from like 7 to 8 o'clock, because that's when all the students are filtering in. We're gonna lock, even though students are coming in, they still have to buzz in.
Yeah.
In order, no matter if it's 7:30,
But even from like a
7:45.
side door.
Side doors, so
Like-
this building, you can only access from 2 points, the front doors or the one to the superintendent's
So
parking
no one
lot.
from inside the library can let
No
someone
one
in?
can let
Okay.
anybody in, unless, we do have staff members who work in this room, they have keys to
Yeah.
that door, they're the only ones who would come in that way. But we're not allowing students to filter through any other but 2 doors.
Okay.
Or 3, is it 3, John? 3 for the juniors, so, which is this door here, but they have to buzz in. And Cindy does see who it is before she lets them.
But like if, let's say I'm in the library and a friend comes knocking on that door, can I can
You
open it
can,
and let.
and it does happen. It
Right.
happens most at the gym entrance.
That's what I
Right.
mean, like, is there any way we
So-
can,
I guess my next question on there, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Eric.
no.
If that door were pushed open, do we have a way to send an alert to the main office?
We have alarms on each of those doors that when they open, there's a sound, a buzzer that goes off.
Okay, great.
But it's gonna be student training that's going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
work best. We don't do that. And I think we've gotten better. I remember my first year here, kids were in and out of every door in community high school. It's really narrowed down to just a few doors. And when somebody's sneaking out that back gym locker room door, that buzzer's loud in the gym, then the teacher can hear it. So we've improved a lot in those measures. So long way to go, but I think these type of incidents that happen across the nation really shake up the student body as well, and they take it more serious. You can see students self-policing themselves. Don't let them in, that type of thing, so.
Out of curiosity though, in between like the start of school and the end of school, so like, the other day I was coming here and there were kids in between the vestibule and they
Yep,
let me in.
they did.
Um,
Trying to kick them out of there.
Okay, I was curious, are we trying to keep
Stay
them?
on the back side. They
Okay.
can't go in the vestibule.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I know it's hard, it's just, it's
Right.
like those what if
Oh, yeah.
situations.
And I think about, well, there's all kinds of what ifs.
Oh, I know.
I think that the more we can acknowledge the issues that we have and address them one by one, we'll be better for it.
Do you foresee any other facilities improvements that might help aid in protecting everybody?
I don't know. I'm anxious to find out what Aroostook County Emergency Management has in store for us, and then collaborating with other schools about what they do. We have one vision here, but perhaps what happened in Caribou has opened their eyes to trying this. So I'm anxious to find out more.
It might be something to bring back to the facilities committee,
Yep,
and maybe we could just do a quick walkthrough,
absolutely.
toss around some ideas.
Next item is just some accolades for the class of 2022. Obviously, you all know we just had the class of 22 graduate, and I was able to participate in the senior banquet night as well as the graduation, and I just wanted to highlight some of the things that were discussed. Number one, early college. UMFK representative came here to present the students with their chords, which means that they took college classes in high school. They presented 42 chords out of 63 students, which is amazing. So those 42 students have earned 245, have taken 245 courses and earned 760 credits, which is mind-boggling. 6 students completed 10 or more courses, and then we had the highest number of college credits earned by a graduating senior this year, 39 credits, and 2 others earned 36. And Leslie Kelly, who was presenting, she says, in my world, that means when these students are enrolling and they come to campus, they're sophomores. They're not freshmen, they're sophomores because they've completed that coursework. So pretty impressive there. 81% of the class of 2022 is going on to post-secondary schooling next year, at 45 with 4-year institutions, 33% with 2-year institutions, and 3% certificate programs. They awarded 168 scholarships at graduation, and that came to a combined total of $668,423. So amazing numbers, and I was really proud of the class of 2022 when I heard these numbers, and I wanted to share that with all of you.
Can I clarify something too?
Yep.
Those credits, I believe, are only the ones earned at UMFK. It doesn't include the ones that, and I know that at least a few of our students took classes at other University of Maine
You're right.
schools.
The articulations at St. John Valley Tech wouldn't have been counted on this, so there's even more. Yeah, that's amazing. Third item under superintendent is your administrator reports, and I do believe you got them a little bit late, but Steve, Kevin, AnnMarie, and Stacey were forwarded to you via email by Jackie. And we do have several administrators right now that are on the Washington trip, Washington DC trip, which is why you are missing some administrators in the meeting tonight.
Committee reports.
We do have policy committee that met last week, and I did notice in your pile, you're missing one policy in that pile, policy BBA should be there as well. Giselle, David, Abby, and I went over the first half of the B section policies, and we're proposing the changes that you see in your packet. Some of these are eliminations. You can see BA is an elimination. Some of them are simple edits. You can see that in most of those. And the ones that are eliminated, it's either because it's not a required policy, it's not a recommended policy, or two policies have combined into one new, two or more have combined into one new one. And for example, duties of the chairperson, that was a standalone policy, but it's now in policy BDB, which is board officers. That policy now talks about all of the duties of all the board members. Some of these policies were discussed this evening with Steve. So you can see policy BBA, which I just handed out to you. Steve had gone over our 2000 version of it. Our committee has recommended a couple of additions. Item B, select, employ, and evaluate the superintendent. Then item L, approve, disapprove personnel nominations from the superintendent, and determines compensation and working conditions of all staff. So you can see some adjustments there. And in addition to B section policies, your last two policies in that pack were two policies that we actually took to you in the May meeting. One of them is ACAAR, discrimination and harassment. We have added a section C on page 2 there. This is a 14-page policy. I only printed 2 pages of it. But Dave had a really good idea of in putting a section in this policy that provides some safeguards during an investigation. So if you have an alleged sexual assault in your school and you have parties involved that still have the right to access school during an investigation, how do you make that work when you have something as serious as that? So we've put a list of possible measures that can be put into place. These are things that we already do or we could expand on, and that way we provide those safeguards. And the last one is our school commitment to standard for ethical and responsible behavior. We tabled this one in the May meeting, and there are some suggestions for level 2 behaviors. And you can see them in the light greenish font. One of the recommendations was to move tobacco, alcohol, and drug use or possession from a level 3 to a level 2. Not that it's not serious, but it's that type of behavior requires more restorative responses than punitive responses. And we felt that level 2 provides more options for restorative responses. You're still guided by board policy for tobacco and alcohol use. I think it's JICHR, so you still have that policy in play, but it just seemed like it was more appropriate. And then for level 3, we moved the unwanted and inappropriate, well, we reworded these, unwanted and inappropriate contact of an explicitly sexual nature as a level 3, and causing or at risk of causing serious bodily harm. It was a blanket statement as a level 2 physical violence, and we moved it to be more prescriptive. There's a lot here to go over. This is first read, so I would recommend at your leisure, go over and look at it really well. Dave and Abby did a wonderful job of providing us some feedback, so I think we're confident that the policy committee has done a good job of looking these over pretty well, and we can discuss them next meeting.
Anybody that's looked at the policy drive knows it's quite an undertaking, what you guys are doing as far as analyzing a whole section at a time. I know I had brought it up several months ago about how we needed to kind of get back up to speed. Some of these policies haven't been updated in up to 20 years ago or more.
Oh, and yeah.
Right?
Really?
So it wasn't my intent to just update everything. You guys have been very aggressive with it. So if you feel like we're biting off more than you can chew, we're going to pick the ones that are glaringly out of date and the ones that seem like they really need to be modernized based on current situations. I think if you like the current approach, I'm okay with that. That's up to
I
you
like
guys.
the current approach.
It's you know, it's like eating an elephant. You say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
But I think as we went through, certain policies point towards others, so it's helpful to look at all of them.
I find it's helping educate me as your superintendent on what our policies say. I'm able to now have the time to say, why do we have this? And make recommendations to remove it, or and then hear from both Abby and Dave about what their thoughts are from a non-education perspective. So it's helpful for me.
Oh, that's great.
Did you have a?
Yeah, on just, well, I was reading that today in my spare time. Level 3 behaviors, under your intervention and consequences, it says all level 2 behaviors shall be.
Yep. Good catch. And I didn't put the whole policy here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't put the whole policy here. I just put the pieces that we also,
Oh.
yeah, adjusted.
So these were first read.
First read all of them, yeah.
So for those of you that aren't familiar, when we do a first read of a policy update, it's just what it is. It's just a read. We're not approving the policy. It's going to go back to committee, be fine-tuned by Ben and the committee, and then be presented once again to the board. So.
The other A's were already approved,
Yep.
correct?
Yes.
That's done deal.
A's done.
Just except for these ones.
Except for these two.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't be revisited. If you see something, if you go back there and you see something, send it to the policy committee. Yeah. So.
You're not on the policy committee, are you?
No. Moving on. Valley Unified Educational Service Center Board Meeting Update.
We had a Valley Unified Board meeting on June 6th. It was a short meeting. Went over the interlocal agreement. Dave was there on behalf of the board here. I'm comfortable sharing a summary, Dave, or if you want to.
No, go ahead, please.
So essentially I had the copy of the ILA with all of the edits that you have all seen, or the proposed edits that you've all seen. Madawaska has seen 33. We discussed a little more in detail those three big items. One is the term, voter representation, and then withdrawal. Dave had some good suggestions as well, specific to the items in the interlocal agreement that have a supermajority vote, which would now be 5/6 based on the 6-member board. He proposed, what about consensus in lieu of 5/6? And so that's something that I've noted, and we've sent to legal counsel. I've sent to Brandon Isaacson about what our discussions were, what our suggestions are, and I also noted some of the suggestions made by Dave or other members from the other 2 units. So legal counsel has that in their possession. Peter Lowe actually followed up with me a little bit today. I'm probably going to follow back up with him and include Keith as well, so that we can get a better idea. But I think in my initial conversation with Peter today, he understands the changes that were proposed. He views it as a positive step for SAD 27 based on where we were with the original, especially with the voter membership. Now you will have a voter, a vote that's proportionate to what you pay into Valley Unified, which he feels is very appropriate. He's not concerned with whether or not you change that cost share every year or every 2 years. He says either way it's appropriate, so he left that up. So we'll talk more with him about some of his suggestions with withdrawal. I did also ask the question, because Dave noticed in statute that it says the commissioner, a withdrawal must be I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially in the statute for regional service centers, in order to withdraw, you have to petition to the commissioner to withdraw, and the commissioner has to determine whether it's not going to be harmful to the parties. In his opinion, if you're bringing a withdrawal agreement that all the parties agree on, he doesn't feel that the commissioner has any business saying no to something that all the parties have come forth and said, we want this withdrawal. And he says, so your withdrawal agreement is all going to be the part of that that's going to solidify whether or not the commissioner says yay or nay. So she didn't seem too concerned with, or he didn't seem too concerned with that. So that's a summary of what was discussed. Like I said, it's been sent to legal counsel, separate legal counsel, so it's going to have different eyes on it, and we'll wait for the feedback and see where things are at that point in time. Did I miss anything, Dave?
Well, I just emphasize a couple things. I was kind of out on a limb on this because I'm the new member there and didn't have anyone else from Fort Kent with me, and I made some proposals that hadn't been made before. So if I could take just a minute to talk to you about why I said what I said and what I was thinking. It raises an interesting issue, though, about how a member of the school board of SAD 27 can go to a meeting of a group of school boards and commit this board. And under the existing proposal, not even by unanimous, if we have 2 board members or 3 board members, it doesn't take all 3 to force to commit this board, which is a really interesting legal issue, I think. And I think kind of a questionable practice, even under the statute, how an independent school board can be committed by a member. It would only take one under the 5-6 proposal, or, yeah. And what if the other member disagrees and the board agrees with the dissenting member? You know, how does that fall out? So it's a really interesting feature of these service center agreements. And as I was thinking about this and working on it, I get the impression maybe we've misunderstood what the goal of these service center agreements are. As I understand it, and I don't claim to have any expertise except that I've read the statute and thought a little bit about it. The notion is that you can save money if you pool resources. And the state really wants to promote that. And so if you're willing to pool resources with other districts, the state will subsidize part of it. So they want you to form these centers to pool resources. And we've done that. In this case, Ben, for instance, is a pool superintendent. He serves not only SAD 27, but also Valley Unified Schools. And the state pays part of his salary. We have computer programs that would be very, very expensive for SAD 27 to purchase, but if Valley United purchases it, Well, the state pays a bunch of it. Or, but at the very least, we save, we don't each have to buy the program. And so this is a goal by the state to get people to pool resources. This particular mechanism, though, was used in the discussion for a unified school in Frenchville. And it was under the aegis, or underneath this structure. And this structure is not designed for that at all. And so as kind of a hangover, I think, in dealing with this structure, we're kind of looking at it and saying, you know, how do we get in, how do we get out, how do we make decisions, thinking we're going to have a common school under this agreement. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think if we're ever to have a common school, it'll have to be a new SAD or an RSU, right? So it's a whole new RSU, whole different type of entity. This is kind of a cooperative agreement, plus, the plus being the commissioner sends us some money for doing it. So it's a really good reason to use it. So if you look at the statute, these agreements, though, are kind of like, and I said this at the meeting, they're like the Hotel California of agreements. You can check in, but you can never leave. And although I agree with you, Ben, that, or with council, that if everybody agrees that we should dissolve this thing and everybody go on their own, it would be tough for the commissioner to say no. But it's unlikely that if any one of us leaves, it will be, by agreement, all happy face, right? It'll be something that we can't agree on. So the hard part in trying to deal with this is to deal with when we have this agreement. I guess the way I'm thinking about it is, it's all a happy thing. If you have an agreement, you do it. If you don't have an agreement, don't do it. One of the neat things about these educational service centers is, say that Madawaska and Frenchville want to do a certain thing, but Fort Kent doesn't want to do it. Madawaska and Frenchville can form their own education service center and do it themselves. And Fort Kent doesn't need to participate. And it doesn't void our participation on the existing agreement. You can belong to 5 of these as a school district. Now, because we're way up here and we're all alone, we won't belong to 5. We've kind of got to be together or we're not. But I guess the point is, there's no coercion. There's no threat. And so when we think about what should the term be, I thought it was let's together every year and agree to do this for another year. If we decided not to, big downside, we have to deal with the commissioner. And I think Sharon made a very effective case at the meeting that when we're dealing with these computer programs, for instance, if we're not working together, there's going to be a whole pile of work to be done to disentangle all of that, to pull the pieces apart and to reestablish them separately. Thinking about that, 2 thoughts come to mind. It seems unlikely, frankly, that we will be pulling out of doing those things that we're currently doing in Valley Unified. It also suggests be careful as you consider adding to that list. Be very careful about what you add. But in terms of how the organization goes forward, why not make it unanimous? Why not make it by consent? And if people disagree, well, they can go on their own and do it by separate service center agreement.
I wish I will not be the executive director of 5.
So I guess my general approach was there's a hangover here we're all experiencing, kind of a shock from the very, very difficult process that the 3 districts just went through that put us on our guard in dealing with this thing. How do we protect ourselves against it? I don't think we have to protect ourselves against it, except remembering that once you're in it, you ain't getting out. I mean, you can get out, but it's not going to be easy in practical terms for the reasons that Sharon suggests, and in legal terms because there's some law there that says if you leave, you've got to join another one, and the commissioner gets to decide ultimately. If everybody's happy about it, I don't think that's a problem. But if you decide to leave, it's probably because there's something that is irritating people, and they no longer want to work together on that issue. And it's going to be really tough to leave, frankly.
What Dave said a while ago, and for those that were here when Valley Unified, essentially when the school wasn't going to happen, it was because the state told us an interlocal agreement, a service center cannot operate a school. You'll need to form an RSU. And that's when we came together and said, can we form this RSU? And it was determined that we weren't gonna form an RSU, so you're absolutely right. This
So-
was never designed to
Yeah.
manage a school.
And just to add to that, for those of us that have been around for a while, back when Governor Baldacci was governor, and they had the mandate saying we're gonna form RSUs or AOSs, or else you're gonna get penalized. So basically, it's a forced marriage with your neighbor. In our case, the only one we could partner up with was Allagash at the time. I think there were efforts to partner up with some of the other neighboring districts, and I don't know what the history was on that, but that fell through. So we were an AOS with with Allagash. And the intent was to streamline administration. Basically, we're gonna penalize you if you don't share superintendents and administrative functions. So that went on after a number of years. The state said, we're no longer gonna penalize you if you don't wanna be part of this relationship anymore. So that's where Allagash went their separate way, we went ours. They have their own administration, we have ours. Along comes the Educational Service Center, or Regional Service Center at the time. So instead of being punitive, they're gonna say, hey, we're gonna give you a reward for sharing services. So I think that was the first misstep. They should have said, you know what, we're gonna give you a carrot at the end of that stick. If you guys wanna form an RSU, things wouldn't have went down the way they went down over these past few years. We could have formed an RSU, we would have potentially had a correct governance structure in place to govern a new school. But along the way, we would have had to have approval of all, well, not all, basically a majority of the constituents in each community would have had to have voted for this process to become an RSU. And that's a major hurdle in
It was the
itself.
cart before the horse, for sure.
Right.
We were given a school before we could operate a school.
So the creation of the service center was really,
That's very
it
interesting.
didn't benefit, it really didn't benefit. I mean, it has benefited in certain ways, but it should have gone the route of, you know, incentivizing us forming RSUs with our neighbors.
The other part that occurs to me is when you decide to close your school, you're really doing a sort of hara-kiri on your community. And that's a huge decision, because when you decide we're no longer going to have a school in Fort Kent, you've really altered the community in a way that cannot be undone in any short period of time. It would take decades if it were to be undone. And it's a huge decision. And that discussion was foreclosed because the immediate response is, yeah, but there's $100 million. And so it cut off that discussion. But it just caused the problem to simmer and fester. And then when Fort Kent was confronted with the prospect of actually losing its school, when its assumption that the school would be here was overcome, then people said, well, no, I guess we don't want to do that. So we never really had the discussion that had to be had about, are we ready as a community to take this step?
So getting back to that last meeting where I was unable to attend, was there any further discussion as far as representation from each unit? Are we going down to a two-member?
That was the
Per-
consensus. That was consensus.
Yeah.
So I'll update you when we have more from legal.
Okay. Next up, new business.
We have no retirements. We do have a resignation of a VRMS EdTech 1. You should have a letter from Desiree Hafford. Desiree will be going to school full-time next year and will not be able to keep her full-time position, although she did say that she would substitute on the days where she is available.
Do we have a motion to accept the resignation of this VRMS EdTech 1?
So moved.
Sarah made the motion. Abigail made the second. Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed?
We also have another ed tech who has filled out their written reasonable assurance and indicated they will not come back for employment next year. This is LaSalle Durio, and we would need a motion to accept this resignation as well.
So moved.
Sarah, do we have a second? Shannon, discussion? All in favor?
And
Any
you-
opposed? None?
Sorry.
Motion
And you
passes.
have a resignation of a head cook at Fork Elementary School, who cites that they have numerous medical and personal reasons for not being able to stay on. This is from Angela Adams.
So moved.
Sarah made the motion to accept the resignation of Angela Adams. Do we have a second?
Second.
Abigail, any discussion? All in favor? Motion approved.
We have a transfer of a pre-K ed tech to a special education support ed tech 3 at Fork Elementary. And you should have a letter from me to Janice Labby. Mr. Neto and I discussed this transfer request, and we agreed that it is good for Janice and good for the school, so we have accepted that transfer. Under new hires, we have a VRMS special education math teacher recommendation. You should have a recommendation from Mr. Coletta, who, with Mr. Doucette, Mary Pelletier, and Sadie Rio, interviewed Gabrielle Adam for special education math. Gabby is currently the special ed teacher at Wisdom Middle High School. And we would look for a motion to accept this hire.
Motion to approve Gabby Adam as a VRMS special education math teacher.
So moved.
Moved by Abigail, second by Shannon. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion approved.
Ben, second transfer, Lisa.
Oh, wait, the CHS cook to FKES.
Oh, yes, sorry. We do have a second transfer, thank you, Lucy. That was an adjustment to the agenda. A transfer of a CHS cook to Fork Elementary head cook, and that is
Lisa Terry.
Lisa Terrio, thank you. Lisa Terrio was working as a CHS cook and had served as the CHS head cook for a while last year while Arlene was out, and so she's ready to take on that role at Fork Elementary School. And I did accept that transfer today.
You have the continuing ed, early childhood.
Yep. What we're at number 2, CHS VRMS band music teacher. We had 4 applicants for this position, which we had a similar vacancy in Madawaska earlier in the spring, and we had 1 applicant. And so I was just really, really impressed. I think our frontline education efforts are starting to stretch our applicant pool, so it's really good. So Mr. Coletta, Mr. Doucette, and Kelly Marquis interviewed 3 of the candidates. Am I right with that, Mr. Coletta? And really had some really good conversations around what individual they would recommend. One of the individuals was more traditional, another one was more this, and another individual was this. So they really weighed in, and they spoke to each applicant about what our situation here at SAD 27, where we had a program that essentially was removed years ago. We've attempted to bring it back in some form over the past 3 years at a half-time basis. And all 3 did reflect back that in order to transform or build a program, it's a multi-year effort, and it has to start at the elementary level so that you can build the program. And so when they had those conversations, one individual really stood out. This individual is Erica Basham, and she has her master's in music education. She earned that in August of 2022. She's from South China, Maine. Really energetic, really fired up about the challenge. We've shared the curriculum with her so that she could get a head start on looking at that. Is anxious to collaborate with some of the other local music teachers in 33 in Madawaska. But I think what stood out for this individual is that she really embraced the fact that she is going to be able to start and build a program with us. and really look at what the strengths are for SAD 27 in building that program. I'll be very honest with you. I and Mr. Coletta and Mr. Doucette do not know exactly what that is yet. I don't know that trumpets and tubas and marching uniforms and plumes on a helmet are things that are going to really jazz up high schoolers nowadays. I don't know that. We'll only know if we build it and it becomes that. But I do know that what Mr. Taylor Martin started with strings and percussions, that's stuff that kids really, really take to. So we do have a good foundation with that. And I think if we build upon that and then expand it through time, Erica knows we don't have a huge budget for music. So we're gonna have to build this thing small, and Mr. Coletta's mentioned, maybe, finding a booster club for band. That happens in other communities, and it has a lot of success. So the recommendation is for Erica Basham, and we're very excited to make that recommendation to you.
We have a motion to approve Erica Basham as a VRMS CHS band music teacher.
So moved.
Moved by Sarah, seconded by Shannon. Any discussion? Dave?
I'm really enthusiastic about the reintroduction of a music program in our schools. I think it's a really important part. It was a really important part of my education. And it's not true for everybody, but it's true for a lot of people. And so this is really welcome. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here for more board engagement, specifically in helping to discuss the curriculum with the people who will be actually delivering it, or maybe even taking an active role in structuring the program. For instance, we're approving a teacher, but we haven't voted to increase it from a half-time to a full-time position. And I think basically it's been moving by consensus. Everybody says, yeah, it's a great idea. And the reason I say that is because when times are tough from a budgetary perspective, if we have a well of enthusiasm about certain programs, then it's much easier for us to discuss intelligently about what we need to do to preserve those programs and how important they are. And so I just want to, kind of as a point of information here, placemat, point of information, request for information.
No, definitely a good point. And then not only developing the product, but marketing it to the community and letting them know, hey, this is what we're excited about. Sometimes the kids don't always come home with the information to the parents, and we want to encourage our children to do other things. And they're not always paying attention to announcements.
Right.
So
We used to have, not that long ago, when I was in middle school and Miss Powell was here, there used to be like a parents' information night, and you'd go and Miss Powell would tell you all about it and show you all the instruments, then you could rent your instrument of choice. And I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was during recess or whatever was going on, but there were certain periods of the day, so all the drummers would go in and practice, and then all the trumpets, and maybe that's not what we're aiming for, but it was,
And I don't know.
it was pretty easy access
Yeah.
for parents who might not be able to afford to buy a trumpet that their kid might use for middle school, like my mom did, but renting was a good option, and it'd be interesting to see what services there are.
I just have a follow-up comment. And I think too, we're all thinking of the generation when I played with Mrs. Workman in the band. But music is really different now.
Right.
And I think pulling kids in now, I think there's a big draw to our electronic music, where you can pull in the trombone and you can pull in the strings, and you can create. Look at Billie Eilish, her brother created music in their bedroom, and you think you'd have a full band there. So, using the tools that we have in our MacBook, you can have almost a complete orchestra, and I think a lot of kids are really pumped about that.
So many of us are, remembering back to our days in elementary school when the pep rally came around to St. Francis Elementary School, and that was exciting. That really, it was loud as heck, and you remember it. It really, it was, whether they were playing the theme song to whatever or anything, it was something different, something to get kids interested in. And I think if we approach this the right way, we can generate enough interest to get it up and running.
So that's a really important point that you're making there, because that is a whole different type of music program than mastering or we never mastered it, but tooting away on a horn or whatever. And it makes a big difference which one the school decides to do and how it decides doing one or maybe doing both. I don't know, but that certainly merits a lot of discussion. There's lots of ways for community involvement too. Everything from getting a service club to buy instruments to, I don't know if you, but at Memorial Day, they're using, it's a fake bugle, right? That plays a beautiful taps because we haven't got anyone to play taps. When I was in high school, Dave Michaud used to do it. He was from the band and he was good and he played taps and he was tied up on Memorial Day, but maybe you could ask the American Legion to fund a scholarship for the music program if the music program provided a bugler, or, you know, just one idea of, we could really brainstorm that and develop, and directly engage the community to help this thing grow.
Definitely.
I think that music booster club would go a long
Yeah,
way
booster,
in generating
yeah.
some of those ideas and some of that enthusiasm. But to kind of address your point and agree with it, Dave, music was easy to eliminate because interest at the high school level had dwindled down to nothing. And I can remember when you were in high school and I was in junior high, coming to basketball games, and that whole opposite side up on the stage was filled with the band, you know, playing as the players came out for warm-ups and during warm-ups and at halftime. I mean, you couldn't even get a quartet to do that at the end. You know, so we need to rebuild the energy and the enthusiasm on the part of the students, and then it'll be very difficult to eliminate the music program.
I think it's okay to ask kids too. For instance, Ms. Workman or Ms. Sassman or Ben Ziegler, if you really want to go there. These people let you come in and play whatever you want. My mother said, "What instrument do you want to play?" And I'd been watching The Friendly Giant, and he played a recorder. And so I obviously am talking to an audience that has no idea about The Friendly Giant. But he was...
I remember The Friendly Giant.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. He played a recorder. I said, "Well, I want to play the instrument like The Friendly Giant did." And my mother said, "Oh, that's a flute." Well, it wasn't a flute. And no, I guess I wouldn't have played a flute, but I ended up playing flute. It'd have been so much better if the band would say, "Okay, I need 7 trumpets. I need 79 trombones or 76 trombones or whatever. Who's going to sign up?" Because kids don't really know, right? But if the band director says, "Hey, this is what we need," or "We need some real computer people here to help us," and encourage people to sign up instead of waiting for them to come, that can work.
I'm going to say something overly obvious, but back to Dave's original point of, and even the discussion here has been like horns and strings and percussion and electronic. I mean, just in this discussion, that's a pretty varied thing. And we're basically, I mean, we're not sticking her out on our own, but someone moving to our community from South China and going, "Okay, we don't know what we want, but we want you to do something and we want it to be awesome. And we want you to get all the community involved, but you don't know who." We're asking a lot of someone.
It'll be a process.
That's why we hired her.
So, we're asking a lot and
Well,
expecting a lot.
Let's have realistic expectations initially, just, you know.
I think realistically, honestly, I think for a first year, we're going to be doing a lot of music appreciation type things. Because we don't know what the interests are of our students. So we're all thinking band and we're thinking productions and all that, but I think what you need to put your mindset around is we're going to start with like music, and this is what music is and what it can be, and really, you know, really getting into the minds of our students about what can be created from different programming. We have to start that way because they don't have any of it. You know, they don't have any. They go from Sam Butod, who does a great job with vocal things in the elementary school, and then they have a large gap, and so we want to fill that gap in with, okay, this is instrumentation, and this is what can be done with you know, different instruments, and then build from there. But we want her to be part of that process, because we can plan and plan and plan, and then this person comes in and goes, what? So we want her to be part of that process as well.
And that engages everybody.
Yeah.
My single most profound musical experience was with Sister Irma in the 1st grade. We had a little rest period where everybody, maybe, we had to put her, and you had to be quiet. It was just a way, I think, of calming us down. But it was a routine every day. And so on that day on rest period, she had an old phonograph, just a very simple box phonograph. And she put Beethoven's Fifth on. And it was, and it was not high fidelity. But we were silent, and we had to listen. And wow, what an incredible impact that had on me. And just in terms of opening my eyes to what the effect music can have. So it's accessible in all kinds of different ways by teachers who, have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Well, we have a motion on the floor to approve Erica Basham as the band music teacher. All in favor? Very good. That's unanimous. What do we have? Item 3.
Continuing education, early childhood aid. This is a recommendation from Stacey Sear, who interviewed Jolene Gardner. Jolene is a part-time bus driver for us and was interested in full-time work. We've managed to arrange a schedule where Jolene will still be able to do her bus runs, then serve as an early childhood aide. So the recommendation for this, because Jolene already is a part-time bus driver, is for the early childhood aid piece.
Do we have a motion to accept? Motion made by Mrs. Wazin. Do we have a second? Ms. Lugden? Any discussion? All in favor of approving Jolene Gardner for the continuing ed early childhood aid position? All in favor?
We have still some openings. You can see it's not as bad as it looks. In fact, I reached out to the administration this morning, and a lot of interviews are in place so that we can start filling those. So things are going to be okay. As I've requested in the past, though, in order to offer somebody a position and not wait till an August meeting, I have a motion to allow the superintendent to fill the remaining vacancies over the summer, which, Mr. Chairman, I think might be a moot point if we're gonna recess this meeting because of time. I think we may have another meeting in a couple weeks, so I would not need that recommendation if that's the case. That way we'll have enough meetings.
Yeah, Ben and I had some discussion earlier. Obviously, we had a very good presentation this evening that took up a good portion of this meeting time. And I think in order to do justice to the remainder of the agenda, what I would like to do is entertain a motion to, looking at my cheat sheet, my place pad, and I made the right motion. I'd move that we place the rest of the agenda on our next meeting, which will be scheduled here shortly.
And I would propose that we have a meeting in 2 weeks, which would be obviously not July 4, unless, it's not July 4, but July 5, 6, or 7. That's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday for the remaining items. Lucy, is it okay if the declaration and computation of votes is tabled till then? Okay.
There's nothing else on here that can't wait.
No, I would like to have good discussions around old business, so I think it's better served. Okay.
Motion to delay the remainder of this evening's agenda till our next July meeting.
Do we want to determine if the date?
Yeah, why don't we do
5, 6,
that
or
right
7?
now?
While we're all in the room?
I'm good with any of either
Me
of
too.
them.
I can't do anything.
Oh, she's going.
Okay. Don't want to zoom in?
Nope.
I think she should.
July 6th is exactly 2 weeks from today. It's Wednesday. With that work?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a motion? Moved by Abigail, seconded by Ms. Bazin. Any further discussion? All in favor of moving the remainder of the agenda to July 6th? All in favor? Very good.
Is that,
All right, Sarah.
Just
very remotely.
We have a couple
I
of.
don't-
Can't
You
do it
can give
remotely?
us a tour.
You're not the Allegheny River or something?
Worse than that.
Okay,
The majority of the meeting.
We're talking iAdventure.
very good. All right, motion to adjourn. Motion by Shannon, seconded by Sarah.